Well, hello there and welcome to Take Two with Jerry and Debbie and you on EWTN Radio. It is your show, and we really want to have you encourage you to enjoy this very special pre-recorded broadcast today. So if you want to dial in today, you're welcome to do that, but I think an audio, maybe a recorded message will be all that you hear. Because it is New Year's Day, we are not live today, but we are happy to bring you an original program that has never aired before with some very special guests who Debbie and I have interacted with on the radio before, and we're looking very forward to talking with them. So Debbie, how you doing? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Another year, the start of a year, which is wonderful. So new beginnings, new hopes, dreams. It's amazing. So we love to have these fresh programs for our Take Two family. And we have great guests. They're husband and wife team, Steve and Becky Greene, and they're with us. They are radio hosts and podcasters and teachers of the faith, a fabulous couple and a beautiful family. I know them very well. I love them, and I can't wait to get started, Jerry.
Absolutely. Also, a happy feast of the Solemnity of Mary, Mother of God, to all who are listening as well. Okay, so again, we're not taking your calls today, but it is going to be a very enlightening, impactful, and I think just a really uplifting conversation with Steve and Becky Greene here on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. And where I'd love to start is, did we actually... introduce them formally?
Let me formally introduce Steve and Becky Greene. They are the hosts of the Catholic Conversation radio show and podcast. And Steve and Becky, the Cradle and the Convert, help Catholics faithfully live their vocation by providing church teaching, navigating moral challenges, and exploring current issues facing the faith in our culture. So that's the proper introduction, but there's more to be said about this amazing couple because they have a beautiful big family, and we want to learn all about them and what they have planned for this new year. So with that, welcome Steve and Becky Greene to Take Two.
Thank you so much, Jerry and Debbie. Super excited to be with you and your listeners, and Happy New Year to you as well.
Thank you so much, Steve. You have your show with Becky called The Catholic Conversation, and I know you talk about your own life, your experiences, and all that, but one of the curious things I would love for you to share about is how the two of you met. So take us back and share how that happened.
Oh yeah. How long you have?
I think I'll start it, but then Becky's got to, I think, carry the bulk of this one. So, as our little show tagline mentions, we're a cradle Catholic and a convert. I'm a cradle Catholic. Becky's a convert. When we met, I'm originally from Wisconsin. I had moved out to Phoenix, Arizona, and I was working as a youth minister at the time. I'm a graduate of Franciscan University of Steubenville. I was an English lit major there, but somewhere in canon law, I think it requires every Franciscan grad to be a youth minister at some point in their professional life. So I was checking that box down here in Phoenix. Had been thinking a little bit about, hey, what am I going to do with the rest of my life because nobody retires from youth ministry. And strangely enough, the priesthood popped in my head as just sort of like an interesting, hey, maybe that way. And I'd never really thought about it. It wasn't like I was against the idea or anything, but it just hadn't occurred to me. So I started thinking and praying a little bit more about that, ended up deciding to take it a little more seriously, do the discernment a little more formally. So I actually applied to seminary. I was a youth minister. I applied to seminary. They put me through a battery of psychological tests, as they do to all seminarians. And then in my case, I didn't hear anything for like 6 weeks. So, which is a little unnerving. I'm aware of the issues I have, but now maybe the Diocese of Phoenix is aware of some issues I wasn't even aware I had. But a month into that kind of silent period after I applied to seminary, I went to a movie with my cousin and a bunch of his friends. And it turns out that one of his friends, now a friend of ours, is first cousin to Jim Caviezel, the Passion of the Christ, Jim Caviezel. So his new movie with Dennis Quaid, Frequency, was coming out. There was a sneak preview. Everyone was going to the movie. So my cousin and I went. We ended up being late. We got bad directions. And after the movie, all of his friends emerged from the theater. We had to kind of sneak in the back because we got there so late. They all emerged. And in the group, which I had been around a few times but didn't really know all that well, was Becky. And the minute I saw her, I thought, well, I have never seen that one before. She immediately caught my eye. So we struck up a conversation, kind of started chatting. And as I've said it since then, her smile just kind of got stuck in my head, which on my end was kind of a little awkward thing because, of course, I've applied for seminary here. And so I was on a softball team with a couple of Catholic buddies, and one of them said, dude, are you going to seminary because you know you're meant to be a priest or you're trying to figure it out? I said, well, no, because I'm trying to figure it out. I just want to give it an honest look. And so he said, well, I would just call her, get her number, take her out on a date, and let the Holy Spirit sort it out. So for the record, I don't know if that's great advice or if that's really universalizable, but it worked out well in my case because I called Becky's friend, Kristen, asked if I could get Becky's number, called Becky. We went out on a date, had a great time. And so as I'm getting ready for this first date, and I'm going to hand this over to Becky here for the next part of it, but as I'm getting ready for this first date, I'm kind of off the maps here. You know, I've applied to seminary, haven't heard anything back, and now I've called the girl and asked her on a date. So I'm like, how do you bring this up, or do you bring this up? And I figured I got to tell her on the first date, because if I wait till later, then it's like, well, when were you planning to tell me? And so being a youth minister again, I decided to come up with Steve's Happy Fun Time First Date Quiz, which was a series of 14 questions. We both got a copy at the beginning of the date. This is how big of a nerd I am. We both get a copy at the beginning of the date, and you circle whichever of the 14 questions you're willing to talk about on this first date. I figured it'd be a nice little icebreaker. But the whole reason I did it, Jerry and Debbie, was for question 14, which was, if you're accepted, are you leaving at the end of summer to go to seminary and discern if you're meant to be a priest? So this was my stupid, clumsy, youth minister nerd way of breaking the topic of, I've applied for seminary, and yes, I asked you out on a date. And meanwhile, her friend had warned me, now, you know, Steve, Becky's not a Catholic. And I was kind of like, well, I've applied to seminary, so we're already totally off the maps here. We're just going to roll with it.
Okay, so before you hand that over to Becky for the real accurate story, okay, you're gonna hear the music. There goes the music. We're gonna hold it right there, and when we come back, more with Steve and Becky Greene. They are amazing radio hosts and podcasters. They're married with a big family, and we're hearing the backstory of how they met, and then what they are doing in ministry on this pre-recorded broadcast of Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. Please stay with us.
Well, it's great to be with you as we turn the calendar to a new year. It's Take Two with Jerry and Debbie, your program. We are asking you to just sit back and relax and enjoy this wonderful conversation we are having with Steve and Becky Greene. They are podcasters and family, have parents of a number of children. We're going to get into a little bit more about that first date that you were hearing about between Steve and Becky at the end of that, going into that first break. But I just have to tell you, first of all, that having just celebrated the Nativity, the church concludes the octave of Christmas by honoring Mary under her greatest title, the Mother of God. And you can find a free ebook we're offering. It's Behold Your Mother, Titles of the Blessed Virgin Mary. And we do hope this ebook will bring your heart closer under her mantle as we share a few of the beautiful and befitting names bestowed upon the Blessed Virgin Mary. Download this today. It's called The Solemnity of Mary. It's a free ebook you will find at EWTN.com. Okay, Becky, it's your turn now to share what you were thinking about going into that first date and how things kind of unfolded after that.
Well, I love what Debbie said about Becky's going to give you the real background. I got to be honest, what I understand. Don't you love that term, too? I got to be honest, like I'm not normally honest. Why do we preface with that? But I will say that from Steve's recollection, whatever he shared with me, that is pretty much how he recounted when he actually first called me to ask me out on that date. And when we first met, it was very much, for me, it was a very exciting encounter because I had just moved up to Phoenix and I didn't know anybody, but I knew this one friend of ours that was a mutual friend, and she had invited me to this movie that night. And all of the people there were Catholic, and I was not Catholic. So I did not only was I not Catholic, I really didn't consider myself anything. So I was already a little bit intimidated going in, thinking I was going to be surrounded by all these Catholic people. Maybe they'll lasso me with rosaries or, just be constantly quoting scripture to me or something. And it turned out that not only were they all very normal and welcoming and friendly, but they were actually people that I felt I could get along with. And when we came out of the movie, because he had been late, I hadn't met him previous to the movie going in, I had that same kind of, oh my goodness, he wasn't here before. I'm very excited about who is this guy that's talking to all these friends that I just met. So there was that sort of instant connection type thing. And so when we were introduced, we began chatting, and I was super excited about the prospect of getting to know this guy. But I remember the first thought I had, because I had not done a lot of dating in my life. I had been a high-level gymnast. I competed for the University of Arizona. I had just moved up to that area, and I thought, boy, this guy seems like he's really got his act together. How come he doesn't have a girlfriend? And I, in my wildest dreams, would have never thought he just applied to seminary. Like, did not occur to me as what the issue could be for why this guy was still single. But I was very excited about the date. And when he gave me that quiz, I actually thought it was a joke, because I thought he was sort of playing off of this star-crossed lovers sort of thing, where he's this devout Catholic and I am this agnostic, pro-choice, self-proclaimed feminist at the time. I look back now and I'm like, I wasn't a real feminist, but I definitely thought I was, and I definitely had bought into a lot of the culture and the secular, sort of default setting about what a woman is, what she should be, and, the beliefs that we need to have to make it in the world. And so I had really bought into all of that. And so we were definitely an interesting couple. I always say we were a match made in purgatory, because from the get-go, we definitely came from very different sides of the spectrum. But one of the things that really, in those early days of dating, because I did go out on a second date with him, which, I mean, you think the quiz is odd, but I think it's odder that a girl would actually say yes to a second date after after finding out this guy's going to go into seminary. But one of the things I always tell people was the very thing that was a little bit off-putting to me that I thought, this idea of religion and this crutch that people use to kind of wag their finger at everybody else in judgment, but then excuse their own behaviors, is kind of how I had my perspective and my perception of what religion was based on different experiences I'd had through my life. I was not terribly excited about the idea of dating somebody who seemed to be so devout, and yet at the very same time, that was the thing that was most attractive about him, because he was very convicted. He had this stability with this faith, like he knew who he was, he knew what he believed, and that actually was very attractive to me, which I was sort of surprised about. And that pulled me to take an interest, at least in finding out more about his faith, because he was so convicted, so much so that he was going to go to seminary and consider giving his entire life to his faith through that vocation of priesthood. So we dated for a little while. We definitely butted heads on a lot of those normal controversial issues where I thought that the church was wrong on her position. The funny thing was I had never stopped long enough to ask why the church had the position that she held on so many of these quote-unquote controversial issues, because had I done that, I would have found that it takes you to the logical conclusion that that's because it's true. But I never had to ask those questions of myself, because I grew up in California, and the default setting is you just sort of accept what you're told about what the church believes, and it stay right there, and you don't have to go any further in digging and investigating. So for the first time, I had to start doing that when I was dating somebody and falling in love with somebody who believed so fully and faithfully and so devoutly in these teachings. And so I, as a birthday present to him, I thought, well, if I really love him and I want to know him more fully and understand him, I need to understand this faith. And so I said I would enter the RCIA process just to investigate and look into it and inquire. And so he actually went off to seminary in the fall, and I entered the RCIA process through the church that he was actually the youth minister at. And I began really unpacking some of the beliefs that I thought I held, and realized I had a lot of holes in my thinking. And I met a lot of people who really met me where I was at. And they showed love and charity and friendship toward me and didn't judge me for where I was at, but they also called me out and made me think a little bit about, what my understanding was of truth. And I really started to kind of have just scales fall from my eyes. I didn't get everything. I didn't understand everything. Obviously, you never can. But there was enough there that I wanted to at least receive the sacraments. I was not baptized, so I was going to be coming, all the way in and getting everything all at once. And so I decided that I would go ahead and receive baptism, confirmation, and First Communion that spring. And on Holy Thursday night, my family, both baptized parents, baptized Catholic, married in the Catholic Church, just didn't raise us Catholic. They themselves weren't really raised Catholic. But I think those graces are generationally there and poured out, and somehow that made its way into my heart. They were very supportive of me and my decision, so I decided to come into the church. And on Holy Thursday night, they were coming out to see me, and I got a call from my mom that they couldn't find my dad at the airport because he had gone to park the car, and he didn't show up at the terminal. This is back before 9/11, where you could all meet up at the terminal, didn't have to go through all together with your tickets. And 2 hours later, I learned that he had dropped of a fatal heart attack at the airport on his way from the parking garage to the terminal. So rather than that Saturday coming into the church, I was picking out caskets for my dad. Oh. And I fell into such a depth, Debbie and Jerry, I fell into such a depth of despair and anger toward God, toward this church. I mean, I blamed everybody. Like, why? I was doing fine without the Catholic Church and without God in my life. I think he was always there, but I was very agnostic about it. And I just was so angry. And, Steve's in seminary. I'm thinking, listen, you took the guy I wanted to marry off to seminary, and now you took the man, my first love, my hero, my dad, through death in this way on Holy Thursday night of all time. So I was really ready to just throw in the towel and run. And when I stopped, and I was about 6 weeks later, I was in California, and I'd gotten a call from a dear friend of mine I'd become friends with in the RCA program. He had been a sponsor for another candidate, actually went on to become Father John Lankett. But he was just John Lankett at the time, and he was calling to check in on me. And he said, I was railing against everything, the church, God, everything. And he stopped me, and he said, so are you still going to become Catholic? And I said, I am. And he said, why? I mean, you seem to have all of this hatred spewing for it. And I said, because I know too much. And essentially what I had realized in that moment was that through that whole journey, I couldn't go back because I now knew that this was the church founded by Christ. He was who he said he was. The church is who she says she is. And as angry as I am, and as hurt as I am, and wounded as I am, I don't really have anywhere else to go. I was very much like Peter in that moment, to whom shall I go? So that began this long healing journey of becoming, having ownership over my faith. This was now my faith. I wasn't doing this for him. I was doing this for me, and it's because I knew it was true. And so, long story long, Steve came back from seminary. I didn't go kidnap him or anything. He actually returned on his own.
Barbed wire and guard dogs.
But he came back, and we began, he had discerned out of the seminary, but now we had to kind of put pieces back together with our relationship. And I had obviously been through a great tragedy. He had changed. I had changed. So that process of walking hand in hand again and going through the dating and the engagement process in the early years of marriage, it wasn't all rainbows and sunshine. We had a lot of healing that we had to do, but thanks be to God, we have such a merciful God who loves us, and who I really believe, Steve really believes, brought us together for the purpose of the vocation of marriage. And so he just continued to chisel and polish us up so that we could, continue to struggle joyfully through this life of living in the domestic church.
Wow. Becky, as you were speaking and filling in the details of the story that Steve started of your journey together, when you got to the part about your dad, I mean, I my heart hurt for you to have to go through that. That's painful. But it sounds like you did have a lot of good support around you with friends and family. I mean, you made mention of Father John Lankin, great priest, a fabulous priest. And so, yeah, that's the good news, is that you had that kind of loving support around you. But a couple things I just wanted to share. First, for our Take Two family, this is a pre-recorded broadcast. This is a special program for you to sit and learn and listen. We're speaking with Steve and Becky Greene. They are podcasters, great radio hosts, and I will tell you that they have an incredible journey and story. So stay tuned in and listen, and then share this broadcast, because this is important. So circling back, Becky, you've been through a lot. You talk about having to step out in faith and to build your trust in God, and to stay committed and to stay focused. Okay, Steve is off at seminary, and absolutely, he comes back and he discerned out of a priestly vocation, and then and then marriage is what he's called to. You were called to that as well, but you had to learn a new surroundings, right? Because you changed going through RCIA, which now I believe isn't it OCIA, Steve? I believe. Isn't that correct? I think we changed the name of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So and then you come back, you're having your courtship, you get married, 6 children, 1 in heaven. So five kids with us here. Tell us a little bit more about this. I mean, this is like kind of, you were both attracted to each other. You commented that Steve was relatively good looking, and Steve commented that you were beautiful, which you are. And so I just want to say that, now what did it look like? Were you two brand new people? Because Steve was coming out of seminary. You were in your faith in the church. All these life things happened around you. You had loss, you had sadness, you had disappointments. How did you navigate this courtship into marriage?
Well, we always tell people, they talk about the honeymoon period. And honestly, we are more in our honeymoon period now, 20 years into marriage, 6 kids in, 5 kids here that we're raising, plumper, grayer, just all of the things that come with age, but also comes this wisdom and humility. We had a rough go in the beginning, and it was precisely because we had become new people in some ways. And then that early attraction and interest in one another, while it's very exciting and it was very new and it was powerful, it was it didn't have, I guess, all of the substance that then came with the loss and the grief and the change in who we are, and the decision to kind of jump in and take on this entrusting of one's identity to another, that learning what marriage really is. I was at a gymnastics reunion. I overheard, just walking by, 2 former teammates chatting about marriage and going to counseling because they were struggling. And one of the friends had said, marriage is this constant power struggle. And I remember, at that time, I'm like 15 years into marriage, and I just kind of shook my head and said to myself, no, it's not. It's about surrender. It's not power. It is the exact opposite. And we were learning that. We were both coming into this with all of this kind of muck of going through what we had gone through. And some of it was good in kind of, for Steve, certainly figuring out that he wasn't called a priesthood, and now he had kind of a direction. And for me, really encountering the faith and recognizing this is true. But then it means that you have to try to put your feet back under you. And how do you walk with this person whom you love, but also, may have hurt you? We both hurt each other. And it was, I really think, just the synergetic effect of the graces of the sacrament. Once we moved into marriage, and it was a struggle still, I had to be kind of shred of my selfishness, as did he. So all that to say, it is an ongoing journey. And I think it's that trust in the graces of the sacrament that they have incredible power to penetrate and change us from within.
You two make a great pair on that journey. Steve and Becky Greene with us here on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. We could spend the whole time talking about how they met, how they married, and so forth, but we want to talk about their podcast when we come back. Stay with us. And once again, a happy new year and a blessed feast of Mary, Mother of God, solemnity today. This is Jerry Usher along with Debbie Georgiani. Our guests are Steve Greene and Becky Greene. It's rare when we tell you not to call in. We hate to do that because it is your show, but if you call in today, we're not here as a pre-recorded show because of the holiday. Of course, you certainly understand that. Maybe you yourself have the day off from work as well. But our conversation with Steve and Becky is really going in a beautiful direction, but we also want to shift gears a little bit and talk about their podcast. And they do it once a week, The Catholic Conversation. And Steve, I'll start with you. I'm perusing through the archived episodes. There's really nothing that you two don't talk about. So talk about the variety of topics and guests that you have, but yet you always bring all of those back to our Catholic faith. Talk about that.
Yeah, thanks, Jerry and Debbie. It's been such a blessing. As you mentioned, we've got 5 kids, and so there's plenty of wonderful Catholic chaos going on. But honestly, it feels like sometimes that couple of hours in the studio for the podcast is the most kind of like intimate one-on-one time we get in a given week. So that's been a real blessing. It was funny. Just one of those. It's a total conspiracy of grace. You look back, and it's not like we had charted out some course. We're like, okay, so then at some point we're going to want to start a podcast and have a radio show. In a sense, it just kind of fell into our laps. We had both done some segments for the radio station down here in Phoenix, and then Becky and the producer were just chatting and sort of pitched hey, wouldn't it be funny if there's like a Steve and Becky show? And kind of a neat little piece of it was when I was in seminary, I was blessed to be able to do a master's degree. So I came out of seminary, obviously wasn't going to be a priest. I felt like, well, I have a master's degree paid for by the Diocese of Phoenix. I should probably give them some kind of return on investment. So I started working for the church. I was actually teaching theology at a Catholic high school out here. And then on the side, I was teaching philosophy and ethics for a local community college. And that's kind of what I wanted to do professionally. I wanted to be a philosophy professor. So we had been thinking about and talking about and praying about possibly me going back to school to do a doctorate and then to try to leverage that into a philosophy professorship somewhere. And it was just one of those, I'm not the greatest guy in the world, Debbie and Jerry, at listening to God. Like, he has to be kind of pretty obvious, or I just don't get it. So I'd been kind of pounding at the door and it just wasn't opening. And Becky and I had kind of both gotten to the point where we're like, okay, I think the answer is no, or at least not yet. And at the same time, we had both decided to do another story about how we got there, but we had both decided that we should do the total consecration to Jesus through Mary. So we actually did the Father Michael Gately 33 Days to Morning Glory one. And it was just amazing, like in short order after just sort of that discernment and letting it go and saying, okay, the answer is no, we're going to accept that. So then what are we supposed to do? And then that consecration, like immediately things just kind of started to fall into place. And in a way, again, that was just so obvious you couldn't miss it. So as we started doing the podcast then, we were talking about kind of what's our format going to be, and we decided we would do kind of like an interview-based show. So Becky and I talk about our family, and we always share little anecdotes about all the craziness that's going on at the greenhouse. But we wanted our listeners to have an opportunity to hear from someone who could really bring some level of expertise to bear on a topic that's relevant to Catholic families, Catholic marriage life, raising Catholic kids, trying to evangelize, live your faith in this culture. And so over the years, it's kind of developed into, we just try to find people who we can have good conversations with on topics that are relevant and of interest, primarily to the domestic church, hopefully anybody, anywhere. But really, we're hoping to have the people that we're talking to speaking to Catholic marriage and family life in a way that can be of benefit. And so, like you said, Jerry, we've had just been blessed to have incredible guests over the years. That's been very humbling, and a conversation that has sort of ranged across the whole spectrum of Catholic faith and life. And so, yeah, that's always kind of the hope. And then we're of course trying to bring our perspective. Becky said earlier, this kind of the idea of we're in a battle and we know that, and we're never perfect. We always joke, we're like, the charism that God entrusted to the Greenes is making other families feel better about themselves. That's our gift. They can, no matter how tough things are in your home, you can look at the Greenes or tune into the podcast and be like, well, at least we got things more together than they do. But that's been a grace to and that was actually behind the name of the show, The Catholic Conversation. We wanted it to be sort of our little contribution to the great Catholic conversation that has been going on for 2,000 years now between the church and the culture. And so, that's kind of been it's been, like I said, just a blessing to do. I'm married to the talent. There's no two ways about that. I'm the junior varsity guy, but it's been a blessing.
Well, I love the Catholic Conversation, and I will tell you, you're making a great contribution. For those that don't know, Steve and Becky, I live in the Diocese of Phoenix as well. So we have mutual friends. You mentioned Father John Lankett and other folks that we've all been in ministry with, that we know and love in the diocese. And I will tell you, Steve, many of my friends have attended your classes, and you are just a very wonderful teacher of the faith. So thank you for that. That is incredible. People just rave about some of the classes that you have taught with formation. So that's fabulous. But the two of praise God is right. But the two of you are really just a beautifully matched couple. I have to tell you, you guys are beautiful on the outside, on the inside. You make the most beautiful family. If you look at family portraits of the Greene family, I mean, it looks like something you'd see on the Brady Bunch. It's so beautiful. I mean, like a TV show or something. You guys are, I think God definitely brought the two of you together. You bring your talents, your gifts together. Jerry always likes to say your sacrament is showing. I believe that. You guys definitely demonstrate that with everybody you meet, and also with the work that you do on radio. Okay. So having said all those wonderful things about you guys, the one beautiful thing about Take Two is we cover the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I've always wanted to ask you this question. So whoever wants to answer, please go right ahead. You're husband and wife of a big family. You've been together for a very long time. You know each other completely. Have you ever fought on air or had an argument after a podcast or a radio show, and you're like, wait a minute, Steve, why did you say that? Or Becky, why did you respond that way? I'm just curious if you've ever had some of those marital disputes or debates after the show.
I love your juicy question, Debbie. I love it. That's so great. We've actually never fought on the air. We had one time where early on, Steve was talking about this car with a license plate that said Papist. And for some reason, I got all worried that, like, if he's announcing that on the air, that we're somehow invading someone's privacy, which is just stupid because the person's driving around in public. But it was just, it was early on, and I just had this moment of like, you can't say that. And I just looked at him. He stopped and looked at me, and someone had been listening. It was like, they sound like a married couple from that conversation we had. So I do recall that, but I think there's only been a couple of times where after the fact, and Steve, you can correct me if I'm misremembering on this, but there's just been a couple of times where, like, afterwards I'll say, it seemed like you flew away there for a moment when I was talking. Like you weren't actually present. Like you were thinking of a Simpsons quote, or you weren't engaged in the interview or something. And I'm just here trying to talk to you, but I don't feel like I'm being heard. And then we've also had silly little conversations about who we think is taking up more airtime. I think you talk longer, and I'm going to time it next time.
Right. So basically, before Steve answers, you're a normal couple, is what you're trying to tell us. Okay,
exactly.
Thank you.
That's
thank
exactly
you.
It.
Yeah, Debbie, I don't know if anyone has ever accused us of being a normal couple before. So thanks for that. But there have been, I would agree, I don't think we've ever actually gotten into an argument on air. There have certainly been some times where we have rolled into the studio after having had a chippy little morning kind of thing, and you can feel the tension, and we're not necessarily at our most lovey-dovey when we walk in, but by the grace of God, I think we've been able to mostly put that aside, at least for the sake of the guests that we're talking to on the show. And it's a funny thing. And we've noticed this, and Jerry and Debbie, I'm sure you have noticed this too. In addition to the podcast, we also work with marriage prep here in the diocese. So we're part of a team that puts on a little God's Plan for a Joy-Filled Marriage Day, a little intro to theology of the body. And we've noticed over the years that a lot of times, when you're getting ready to do something in an apostolate, that you know is a work of the Holy Spirit, this is something that you've been called to do, it's something that can be a blessing to others. Like sometimes that spiritual attack is really palpable in your marriage. You find yourself just arguing about stupid, nitpicky stuff and getting all wrapped around the axle about something that should just be let it go. And so we've definitely had that experience to the point where sometimes we even kind of look at each other and almost kind of half chuckle in the middle of the irritation, like, oh yeah, we know what's going on here. The enemy is definitely trying to throw some roadblocks and obstacles in the way. So yeah, that's definitely a part of the reality for sure.
Well, you probably go into the taping or the podcast thinking, hey, this is going to be a great episode because the enemy is just like all over us here. So that's usually a good sign. Steve and Becky Greene, our guests here on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie, a pre-recorded broadcast. Happy Solemnity of Mary, Mother of God. Happy New Year's Day. We do have the day off, but we invite you to just continue to listen to this amazing conversation. And getting back to what you were both talking about, and either one of you can respond to this, one of the things Debbie mentioned on our show, we like to cover the good, the bad, and the ugly, and that includes our own lives. We share the ugliness that we've been through, the wounds we have suffered, the victories, the healing God has brought into our lives. And I'm just afraid that there are too many people on the radio who, really don't allow people to have that glimpse inside of them, if you know what I mean. And so they're almost like, porcelain dolls or something, kind of plastic. What you're saying is you're not that. And Debbie and I have found that the Take Two family is absolutely bonkers over their opportunity to share their story on our show because we do the same thing. So I'm just thinking for the two of you on the Catholic Conversation, it's got to be an exactly same kind of thing with the listeners. They go, you know what? These people are real and I get them and they live lives just like me. So your thoughts on that?
Yeah, imperfection is relatable, and we are definitely imperfect, and we're not afraid to, be confident in that God, that's what God is working in. He knows that we're all sinners and we're all imperfect, and yet just the fact that you're getting up and stumbling and bumbling your way through, but your eyes are attempting to be fixed on Him in this quest for holiness and to live out the faith and live out the domestic church while you're in the trenches. That's what we felt has been part of our charism, is just being able to be vulnerable with that, but also know that, people, like social media is always just this snapshot of someone's perfect corner of the room. And it can have really negative consequences when we start to kind of compare our lives to what we think is this perfect reality in other people's lives. And we don't want to ever be that, because that would be false. It would be fabricated. And so for us, the just authenticity of what real messy married life and family is, that's what's going to make it attractive. If we try to make it look too wonderful and beautiful and always, everything is great, then the ideal is going to seem too much for people to strive for. And I think we need more kids. We need more marriages. We need people to be willing to get in and fight the good fight together. And you have to know the reality of what you're getting into and be willing to embrace it.
Right. Yeah. One of my, I love G.K. Chesterton. He's one of my favorite writers. And one of my favorite Chesterton quotes is, anything worth doing is worth doing badly, which, of course, if you don't think about it, it might sound like he gave you permission to just, put no effort into anything. But, of course, what he's saying is if it's something important, you can't put it off until you can do it perfectly. You got to launch into it, do your best, take your swings. There's going to be strikes and gutters. There's going to be ups and downs. And exactly what Becky just said, the reality is we half at most jokingly say we were really good parents before we had kids. Like it's just, but then the reality of life sets in, and you as you both know, when you're married and you have kids, part of the grace of that vocation is the severe mercy of having the people who have been entrusted to your spouse and your kids show you in very clear and undeniable ways where you need work, where you're not hitting the mark, where you're falling short, where you need to grow in holiness or you need to grow in virtue. And so that whole kind of crazy, messy process, as Becky and I were beginning the show, and it's not like we're, some huge international celebrities, there's not paparazzi jumping out from behind the bananas when we go to the grocery store or anything. But even just doing something with a public-facing element to it, like the podcast, and you two know this with your radio show too. You want to be conscious of the fact that we are a witness sometimes, and we don't have this all figured out. And if we tried to pretend that we had it all figured out, that would be awful. That would be just a soul-crushing pressure to be carrying around, thinking if we ever screw up or say the wrong thing or don't react well to something, or they see how not together we are sometimes, or our kids are fighting or, talk back to us, they would just shatter this image. So it's like better to not even have that image to begin with. We'll just kind of trot out the goofiness of the Greenes, and hopefully people will enjoy it and benefit from it. And part of the theme, I think, that's run through that for us too is, and we're not always living in this reality. We have to kind of remind ourselves. But as we know, the fact of the matter is, Catholic marriage and family life, this great vocation, is not our work. It's Christ's work, and we've been entrusted with a little piece of it. But we're really called to just offer our 5 loaves and 2 fish, and then He's got to take that meager little insufficient offering, and He's got to bless it and multiply it and meet the need. We're nobody's salvation. So, yeah, that's been kind of an important thing to hold on to. And then that, as it makes you go back to, we need to surrender it. We need to let it go. We need to offer it up. We need to put it back in His hands and sometimes kind of take our hands off the wheel.
So you just said it, Steve. I was trying to think of the Catholic sitcom for the two of you, and you came up with the name right on air with us. Goofiness of the Greenes. I love that.
Yeah.
That sounds like a Catholic sitcom. Goofiness of the Greenes. I love that. Okay, but Becky, what you said about imperfection is relatable. Jerry and I both commented as soon as you said that. We're like, we need to ask Becky if we can borrow that. Imperfection is relatable. So true. Jerry says it all the time. Jerry's big on a lot of these statements. I love the wreckage that is made. Jerry says that, and it is completely obvious that we're human beings. We have our character flaws. We have our problems. We have our low days, our good days, our off days, when we're hungry, when we're tired, when we're cranky, and we really want to be real. And we're pilgrims on a journey, and we're trying to get to heaven, trying to grab as many people with us as possible. And, the sooner we realize that we're the body of Christ, right? And we all come together, support one another, pray for each other, but don't expect, everybody to be perfect. It's not where it is. And we have to realize that and be compassionate and understanding. And I agree with you. So Becky, that was fabulous. And Steve, your response was equally as good. What do you say to all of it, Jerry? I said your line. I love the wreckage that is me, but I've always loved when you say that.
Well, we are all a blessed, beautiful, lovable pile of wreckage, and we don't need to dwell on that because God can rebuild us in so many ways if we give Him the opportunity to do that. Real quickly here, I just want to mention, if there is perfection found on the radio, it is Monday through Friday at 6 Eastern Time. It is Catholic Answers Live. Cy Kellett takes your calls and talks with some of the leading apologists and theologians in the church today. And EWTN, by the way, is the exclusive radio home for Catholic Answers Live. So you're going to get it, like I said again, 2-hour dose of Catholic Answers Live every Monday through Friday at 6 Eastern Time on EWTN Radio. I had something else I was going to ask Debbie.
I just wanted to share this because this is what's going to happen, because the Take Two family always finds a way to send an email to us and our producer Ace. Where can folks find you? Is the easiest place for the Take Two family to find you at cradleandconvert.com? Would that be the easiest place, the central place?
That's probably the easiest. I also welcome anyone. They can email us through our email, which is cradleandconvert@gmail.com. they can contact us through there. But yep, our website is the best place to. Now, in our imperfection, I am not updating that website very often, so it may look like it hasn't been updated in a while, and that's because that's accurate. But I do believe the.
To start being more diligent about the website updating.
Right.
Okay,
So what you're saying is the kids are a little older than they are in the picture.
That's what I was going to say. Are the kids driving already?
They are. I have two driving. In fact, one just got his license, so I'm in constant state of anxiety over that. But
Well, we literally have about total of 5 minutes. And I know we're just having such an amazing conversation, but, what would you, each one of you, give you a minute or two each, based on your own experience, your podcast, the feedback you get from your listeners, just, approaching life in general, what kind of words of wisdom, encouragement, uplifting words would you say to those who are listening now? Because our listeners, they are about not looking back, they're about looking forward. We do that all the time with our life coaching. So as people look to the future for themselves, their relationships and their families, just impart to them a word of encouragement before we end the broadcast.
I would just say that it may sound cliche, but that trust in God's plan for you, and that there is a vocation that has been assigned to you, and to seek that out and to live that out. Once you know what you're called to, and if it's marriage and you are in the thick of that vocation of journeying hand in hand with this other imperfect human being and the dynamic that comes out of that, to really be open to what God's will is. And I would say for women especially, we have the feminine genius. Our maternal antenna, our feminine antenna, can be really tuned to the frequency of the Holy Spirit if we're willing to just sort of get out of the way and submit to our role and what God has done with femininity, rather than trying to grasp onto what the world tells us we're supposed to be, because I think we have this great opportunity to have womanhood really be resurrected in our culture. And we need good mothers, we need good fathers leading the way, living out authentic masculinity, so that we can raise up this next generation of culture warriors who can go out and fight this fight, because the enemy is really after marriage, and it's really after the family, and God's going to give you the grace to do what needs to be done if we're just submit and are open and surrender to him.
Yeah. Since Becky kind of spoke specifically to the ladies, maybe let me just say something to the guys. The more I've thought about this as a husband, as a father, as a man struggling to be a good disciple of Jesus Christ in the Catholic Church, for me, just the paradigm of the feeding of the 5,000 has become more and more something I hang my hat on. We're always faced with these unmeetable needs, just like the disciples on that lonely hillside 2,000 years ago. We don't have what it takes to meet the needs in front of us, and that's in our marriages. That's raising our kids, when kids are struggling. And then then we step outside of our homes and face this culture which is just coming unglued before our eyes. And we're trying to live this marriage. We're trying to raise these kids, and we're trying to help them find their faith and keep their faith in the midst of this content. It seems so overwhelming sometimes. And then if we can just remember, it's not our work. Guys, we're nobody's salvation, not even our own. It's his work, and we're just supposed to do the little contribution that we can do. And so that I just, in a sense, it's almost kind of like my prayer of surrender is just, Lord, what are the 5 loaves and 2 fish you're asking me to contribute to this great thing you've entrusted to me? Because it's bigger than I could ever possibly hope to conquer on my own. And then for guys, too, I think a piece of that, again, just going back to that Chesterton quote, anything worth doing is worth doing badly, and there's nothing more worth doing than your vocation as a man, as a husband, as a father. And so then do it badly. Offer the 5 loaves and 2 fish, and sometimes they're moldy loaves and rotten fish, but just make the contribution. Bishop Olmsted, of course, wrote that beautiful letter to men, Into the Breach, which is just an encouragement to men to strive, to try to be better, to do what you can, and then to be committed to learning on the journey. Might do it badly at first, but we can grow over time. We can mature over time. We can become stronger and holier over time. So that would be, I think, my just word of encouragement to my brothers is there's nothing more worth doing, so do it badly. Ask what the 5 loaves and 2 fish you can contribute are, and then step into the breach and give it the best you got day in and day out.
Amen. Yeah, I think many people who hear you and watch you and so forth might think, oh, well, there goes super family, but you guys have made it clear on this broadcast. You're doing the foundational stuff. It's a struggle to be good parents and to raise your kids, like you said, so that they're going to know their vocation from God and know what they're called to do in life and be faithful Catholics as they grow up. So you are an amazing inspiration. Steve and Becky Greene, I want to thank you so much for being with us on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. What a beautiful day to have you on the air, the Solemnity of Mary, Mother of God. So thank you both for your time today. We appreciate it so much.
Thank you to both of you,
Jerry
too.
and Debbie.
We love you guys.
Love you too.
Thanks, you guys. We love you too. You can find them at cradleandconvert.com. Happy New Year, everyone. This is so exciting. A new year, big dreams. We love the Take Two family. Thank you, Ace McKay, our producer, for putting this wonderful broadcast together. We'll be back with you again. And until then, have a beautiful and blessed day. We'll see you real soon.